Hello everyone and welcome back to, well, a video in quite some time. We're going to look at the British GP DLC. You probably see a few videos on a couple other channels as well. We're going to do track walks. I'll do them as short as possible to give you the most interesting, most important parts of each. Of course, we're going to do some hot laps alongside that as well. And I want to talk you through those changes that are coming with the latest 1.7.0 patch. Most notably, they were nice to support us with a change log already. There's going to be some change to the dynamic track in wet conditions. Essentially, it all comes down to that the dry line is going to appear less slowly in conditions where there's overcast, not so much sun out, and at night conditions, for example. Of course, going to look at the tracks Snetterton, Oulton Park, and Donington. Then there's a change to the wet tires itself, something around the heat dissipation. There hasn't been too much detail on that. It might improve the handling on lighter and mid-engine cars, so this will be down to testing later on. Let's see if I get the time to do something like that. There is also, and we probably need that especially for Oulton Park and Snetterton, which are really bumpy tracks, a lot of elevation up and down. The ground collision has been updated, so there's just notably going to be way less ground collisions from the car on the splitter. We'll probably have to test Imola as well for the fast chicane with the bumps there. If the ground collision has changed there are a few other places like Silverstone into Stowe where the braking zone has this very notable bump. Similar things to happen on Barcelona into the turn 6-7 chicane there. And there must be another place that I just don't remember right now where the bumping, of course, into Eau Rouge, where you go into the dip where the car has loads of compression there. Sometimes there's an issue with ground collisions on some cars. This will be the main physical changes. There are some BOP things implemented like fuel tank sizes, not too important, I guess. You can now do, for those liking single player, the AI now has multi-class. So you can do multi-class races in single player. Probably going to do well for some content for a few guys out there like Chris High, for example. What else do we have? The server browser now has a few filter options, few sorting options. Gives you easier overview of the servers at least, but I guess since everybody's driving leagues nowadays, not so much public servers, I guess this won't be, well, don't make too much of an impact, but it's nice that they're starting to go in this direction because I think there's a lot of people who requested that. What else do we have? There's a bit of a graphics update. I haven't looked into it that much. It's around the shadows, and you can have a different option of getting them displayed quicker or more detailed or whatnot. Don't think that's too important because most people probably don't run the game on that high settings anyway for the performance, for how performance hungry it is, essentially. This should be the introduction. I'm heading right over to the track guides. I hope you enjoy. All right, I'm standing at the, well, not back straight, but in the last sector of Snetterton, and I want to take you through that track really quick. I mean, how quick a track walk can be. So let's hurry up here to stay reasonable with your time. Let's go to the spectator camera and let's start at the start of the lap, and yeah, just ditch everything here for now. And this is where it's going to be. You can already see, okay, this is, I guess, one of the pit boxes that is longer compared to the other both new tracks, but everything is rather narrow. Let's go for the first corner. First thing I really notice is we don't have the traditional braking markers showing you the meters. Probably because in the UK they use feet and nobody uses them elsewhere in the world. So they found something else, and I guess these boards translate to something like 150, 150 meters. So let's just consider these. You can already see where the braking point is going to be, where the dark line is getting to be, well, becoming even darker. So somewhere there will be your braking point, and then there's very little space here on the entry or in the braking zone. You can see you have to max out on the track, which is true always more or less, but here on this narrow track it becomes even more important to use every little centimeter that you can get. Additionally, let's look through this corner. I think the best view of corners is always the one from the top initially to really get an idea of the shape of this corner. And I think what you should be able to see is that we'll have, one second, where is my nice tool here? There you go. So this should be something to point out. So we have like an arch of the corner here. So this is where the corner really starts. Then it flattens out a bit in the middle. It's almost straight. I mean, I'm exaggerating, okay? And then we'll have a second kind of cornering thing there, or a tighter radius going on later on in the corner, which just means you get a very weird perception throughout this corner as you drive along. So you have to take that, or keep that in mind as you drive here, which usually means going a little bit too fast through the first kind of kink, then running a bit wide. You can see the ideal line does that in, well, at least to some degree, and then coming tight for a second time. Additional special things here that we haven't seen on many tracks before, if any, if I'm correct. You can see initially the curb starts as we know them, but then all of a sudden the banking of the curb itself changes to be, well, negative, and it kind of drags you in. This is inviting for a race car driver because you get basically additional grip for free if the car is being pulled towards the inside. The problem comes a bit later here though. As we fly along, you can see all of a sudden, well, there's something really nasty built in, and this is pretty much a jump for a GT3 car. And you definitely want to avoid that, so don't get fooled into kind of trying to let the car work with that negative camber of the curb. It's the curb, all right? The next bit then is, if this spits you out, you're probably already dead. The other thing is you have to really wait for the second apex in the corner to come, because on the exit there's very, very little space. This curb doesn't really serve as a runoff. You're out of track quicker than you can ever imagine. And yeah, this little patch here probably doesn't help too much either. Then there's a quick run down to the next corner. Again, these braking markers are a bit different, so you're braking at the what must be the 100-meter board. Also, where a good indication where the ideal line becomes a bit darker. What we're having here is, let's view it from above, pretty much a perfect 180-degree corner. Normal radius, this will be something like a slight double apex approach. Just don't be fooled here. It's wider at the beginning, right here, and then becomes suddenly very tight towards the exit, where if you go into that 2 wide, 3 wide potentially, you're probably going to have huge troubles on the exit. The next thing that's new in the game really is these type of curbs. We have something similar on Nürburgring Turn 3, where the inside kind of has additional, not tarmac, but something solid you can use. And these curbs here kind of resemble similar thing, just more track you can use on the exit. This is not very rumbly here. You can definitely use that, and you'll probably want to learn where the game gives you the off-track penalty in the end. And I guess it will be the white line eventually. Short straight again ahead. This, all of the first sector is pretty similar, I have to say, to Brands Hatch, right? You have this fast right corner, then you have a pretty much a hairpin right, and then you come to this left-hander here, which, so everything until here is pretty Brands Hatchy, if you ask me. Let's view this from above though. I think you're arriving at third, almost fourth gear by that point. And again, track super narrow. which makes it difficult in the first place, and there isn't much braking zone going on. You're probably just downshifting, braking a tiny bit, and then you have to delay the apex in this corner quite a bit because it's a rather long one. And if you end up too slow too early, you're gonna have to start playing with the throttle and whatnot to not run onto the inside grass. Something additional to spot here, maybe I oversaw it just in the first corner, is we have these poles on the inside that can work as reference points for some time, but I'm sure since they're so close to the track, sooner or later someone will take them out, so it's probably best to not work with them in the first place. Let's look at the exit here. Same type of this new curb, just on that corner. It's way more bumpy than on the first one. I'm not sure if we can actually see this here if we fly along. Not really, but as you drive over it, you'll notice it's definitely not as flat and perfectly shaped as the one we got out of the hairpin. So here you want to use the runoff, but you can see there's so much available. You probably easy off-track the car here. So it's about learning where the off-track really is and coming back to the road right before this thing ends here, because if you run through that grass, gonna be really bumpy because your lap time. We don't want that. Straight ahead, I think it's fourth, maybe just shortly into fifth gear, but looking at the braking zones starting something like 70 meters or something. Probably not traveling too fast, and we'll again have, let's look at this from above, somewhat of a 90-degree corner where I think it will be pretty likely we're running some sort of double apex approach, right? So you're doing something like this, run a bit wide here, and then coming inside for a second time to accelerate away from the corner. This is typically the thing you do with these type of corners. Then let's take a look at the exit here. Not as much curb on the outside, but definitely not rumbly. You can use all of it without having to think about it. Also, it's not that wide that it invites you to do off track, so pretty safe corner here overall. I'd say pretty standard. The next one though, quite the opposite, really tricky. You barely get enough speed to really need the brake for this corner, but it's going to be in a way where you just needed a very tiny amount, and the timing here is really important to manage the weight transfer to go through this corner. There also isn't really an indication left nor right where you could have a reference point for braking or slowing down, lifting, or whatever you have to do here. Probably depends on the setup and car. But then we have something new here on the inside, which is this tire stack, which does move. Which also means in a race, probably sooner or later, someone will hit it and won't be in that same spot. So it probably doesn't serve as a good reference point to learn the track. The other bit is this curb here on the inside. You definitely want to use everything because the track in general is so narrow. Every little extra bit you can get is really important. But this curb also is really bumpy if you just take a tiny bit too much and start using the grass. So it's a risky corner. Definitely. And on the exit as well, there is some curb, but it's barely enough to really use it and get the shift back to the left side done. Overall, very tricky corner. Let's look at it from above. You can also see the corner shape. Not a perfect, it's more like an 80-70 degree corner or something, and you're probably looking for a tiny bit later apex than the ideal line suggests. This is not going to be too bumpy here in the exit, but make sure to not use too much because it becomes ever narrower, right? So initially it's, let's say, half a car width or so, then it becomes third of a car width, then it becomes, well, quarter of a car width, and then it ends. So this curb changes its width throughout the length of the curb. Next one, again, these braking markers just indicating there's a corner. Who would have known? This corner even slower. So the first one was something like second, maybe third gear low rev, something like that. This is going to be first gear. You can use the inside curb here for the first time, really. There's a lot more to have. Probably want to avoid the grass because then you get the off-track notification. And let's look at the shape from above. And I think the nasty bit here is that even though it's a 90-degree corner, afterwards it kind of keeps being a corner. So you can't just take it as have the entry, have the exit. You have to tame the throttle a lot on the exit to make this second part of the corner there as well. So be aware of that. There's no curb on the outside whatsoever, really. well, at least that part. But I guess this is more slippery, and then you can't really put the power down. At least in the BMW, I struggled a lot, and the traction control was on fire, keeping the car on the road here. So this corner keeps going, and then there's not really a straight in between. You just keep accelerating, and before you even get to upshift properly, you have to brake once more. Even though just a tiny tap on the brakes really, or maybe a short harsh tap on the brake or something for this corner, because you didn't have the chance to build enough speed for this one. And then it's a really long corner once more, so you have to keep reducing your speed throughout this corner for a really long time. Pretty much, let's say this is where you tap the brake or so here, and then you're gonna roll quite a while until you have your slow speed someone really late here in the corner. And again, this tire stack here probably won't serve as too much of a reference point for long as soon as cars take it out of its place. Just make sure the corner kind of tightens toward the end. So you definitely want to do this late apex kind of thing here, and then use the power to keep the car rotating on the exit. Okay, let's go for it, because then we're gonna have the straight ahead, very, very tiny curb here on the exit, so there isn't much runoff, not a lot of fault that the track will forgive you. So really make sure, have the apex late, and this shouldn't be much of a problem. Flying over that straight, I think we're just managing up to 5th gear here or something. Again, the braking markers indicating something. And this will be your braking point here, more or less, at the board with a single stripe, probably being the 50-meter board. The thing just is in this section that's viewed from above that you're pretty much going really fast through this left-hander here while applying the brakes, so the rear will be really, really loose. It's going to be really tricky, while you have to stick the car to the inside here to get a nice entry for this 90-degree right-hander there, which is a pretty nasty corner in general. This curb here kind of doesn't want you to use it too much, and you kind of want to take a wider arch initially to then be on the inside here, on the left side, to get the wide and nice entry for the right-hander, where not just that the track is super narrow, but you get additional penalty from cutting across the sausage curb. So this is not going to be a pleasure turn, to say the least. Little runoff on the exit, and yeah, I think you can already see that the corner kind of keeps going a few degrees and becomes tighter towards the end once more, so don't be deceived by the initial impression that you get from the shape of the corner. This one here, I don't really know how to... It's more of an interruption of the straight, really. You'll manage up to 3rd gear here somewhat, and there isn't really any braking that you will need. Maybe a slight tap or so, maybe just stop the acceleration. It's probably not even a full lift, but make sure to take a look at how this track is shaped. So what you can see is there's going to be somewhat downhill, slight banking coming to the inside, but then the curb goes, well, into the opposite direction, and just working with the shape of the track here to get the car around that corner. Don't use too much, because this becomes really high pretty quickly and it's going to spit you out of that corner. And additionally, if you take a look at that, it's one of these corners that keeps going. Okay, so you have the curb on the inside, but it's definitely not the middle of the corner, which is quite a bit later somewhat, and then putting the power down isn't as easy and intuitive initially. You always have to kind of wait a tiny bit longer. Especially when you come out of the banking, all of a sudden you'll experience a slight lack of grip. Then a short straight ahead and a very, very long right-hander there. Okay, so this is, how would you call that? 160-degree corner or something in total, and it becomes ever tighter. And you'll probably, let me try this once more here. That's a nice pinning. We don't need any more. You'd probably be accelerating up until here or so in this corner. That will be 4th gear, 220 or so. So pretty quick. And then it's about finding, without any reference points on the left or the right, a point in the corner where you're going off throttle and where you start the braking procedure. This curb here on the inside is nice to have, but it doesn't really, I don't see the point of using it. It's just, yeah, giving you an indication of where you are in this corner and how far it still is to the eventual braking zone, which will be somewhere from here or so. Really tricky because everything is happening in the corner. You get the load shift to the front, the rear is going to become light, but you have to pin the car to the inside here to open up the entry into this very tight left-hander. So pretty similar situation to when we came from under the bridge, just in the opposite direction this time around. Hey, there you go. So then flying through this one, somewhere 220 and getting slower and slower and slower and having to maintain the speed also for a while in between. You have these poles, now it's 2. And then the track gets narrower and narrower, which will be a place for dive bombs, let me tell you that. And again, you get the penalty from using just a tiny bit too much track where they made it extra narrow with the sausage curb on the inside there. Exit curb is fine. This should be a rundown of the Snetterton track here. And I just want to stop it there and move on to the next one. See you in a second. Now I think we're ready for the Oldham part, and I think it's the most interesting of the 3 tracks we're getting in terms of how you perceive it as a driver. It's a track that is heavily focused on the driver. You have to work the car a lot to be fast here, and we'll certainly see good differences between the different skill levels on this track, and we might even be able to offset slower to faster cars with just skill on this track, because it's really asking the driver a lot. So again, we're in the cockpit already. Let's go to the free cam because it offers the best opportunity. You can already see the track goes up and down here a bit, and you'll probably have that around the whole of the track. In general, the banking and the elevation changes here on this track going to define each corner. This is the last one, so let's start at the start-finish line, which is here. You can already see, viewing this from here, that the start-finish line isn't really straight at all, which means we don't really have a straight here. Also, the pit box seems rather short. I mean, the entry is long, but the pits itself don't seem to be too many. Sorry, I didn't count, but it looks something like 20 to 30 maybe if we're lucky. So it's going to be crammed in there even more than we've seen on other tracks. Good luck with 50-car multi-class races. Okay, coming across the start-finish line then, you again see these new kind of braking markers that we haven't seen on other tracks before, except for the British GT ones now. And it only warns you that danger is ahead. There's no number on it, how big the danger is, so to say. You will then see the track starts to widen before the corner, so you definitely want to try to maximize on the track here. Slightly drift towards the outside in the braking zone, and then this corner already is a pretty daunting one. Let's view it from above, which should give a better indication, and you can see it does have some radius going on early on, which then tightens, then opens up, of course, towards the exit. But this makes the braking also very tricky in where you try to do the braking in a straight line and where you start to do the turn-in phase. So something already to keep in mind how to manage the approach here, and it's probably going to be something like, oopsie, braking here in the straight line, but then a lot of trail braking needed up until this first pole here on the inside, where you then want to go for the curb. The next thing you can see is there is a new type. I think we've seen these type of curves on Zolder on the exit turn 2, where you have these rounded additional spots in the middle of the curb. The only thing is, in this section where they are painted, you're not using the curb in the first place. You're really only using it afterwards, where it's painted black as well from the tire skid marks. So there's really no point for these. However, this curb then, you definitely want to use it, but if you take a look at the shape, there is quite a bit of bumps going on additional to the curb rattling shape itself. So you go into the dip here, then all of a sudden you go over a bump, come into another dip. So this is going to upset the car, right? And then here there's a proper notch here at the end where the car can fall into and get really spit out of that corner. Overall, pretty nasty. The other bit then is there is it's hard to see a bit, right? But there definitely is banking and elevation changes going on in this corner, and you want to use that to your advantage as long as you can, staying on the inside here where the banking is the biggest. And then you have to really take care, because here over this bump, all of a sudden towards the exit, the banking stops. You come over a small crest, the car gets light, and all of a sudden there's way more oversteer, understeer. Everything is happening in the car but steering. So you're definitely running wide out of this corner more often than not, and using a lot of this new type of curb here on the exit, and it's very easy to off track here. Something like third gear is what I reckoned in this corner in most cars. Then this short straight ahead, again just barely a straight, ends with a flat out corner right before the braking zone, and you definitely let me paint this real quick. You definitely want to have hello. Why does it not speak to me? Here. There you go. You definitely want to take that wide arch here. Come to the outside here then, because you want to be straight from here, because this is where the braking zone is, and there will be an additional bump, or rather jump even, before you want to apply the brakes. You definitely don't want to be turning in this situation. So really tricky section already early here on the track. So you're coming over this crest, and here it's even hard to see something. Then you can see just by the white line and its shape on the outside that there's definitely elevation changes going on. And then pretty much as you jump over this and fall into this dipper here, this is your braking point. And it's a daunting braking point, because the car will be all over the place if you don't allow it to kind of work with the track surface here. Not much braking really going on. This will be fourth high ref gear speed here or something, so 210 to 20 maybe or so. Then a bit of harsh braking, but you can see this corner is rather long, so you also have to keep the speed alive for quite a while, which just means there's a harsh initial braking, then there's a bit of rolling, and in this particular corner there's also a lot of praying going on. So you can see the tightest arch this corner has is somewhere in the middle here. This is where it's the tightest. Then it opens up a bit here in this later section, and until this. So pretty much your apex will be somewhere here or so, where you're going to be the slowest. And then pinning the power down, praying, it's going to be stupid slippery, bumps upsetting the car. Very tricky to drive, to say the least here. Additionally, now as we're flying through here, you'll see the elevation. So you're coming downhill until here. There's slight banking going on, pulling you into the corner. The curb on the inside, while it looks harmless, it's going to outright kill you. So once you hit that curb, you will either have the front going away from you, or the rear, or both, or one after the other. This is definitely something to work out, and I can assure you that you won't do a lap the same way twice in a row here. That's super difficult. Then this curb suddenly changes, well, the type of curb it is really. So here it's all rumbly, and then suddenly if you move further a bit, the curb type kind of changes, and you have this notch there in the middle where you could, in theory at least, hook the inside tire a bit to get some extra rotation through this corner, but it's going to be very tricky to nail this point on the track. Then on the outside, you do have, again, this new type of curb. It's a bit wider than you're actually allowed to use, so you're probably off-tracking the car if you go until the grass line here. If you go close enough, you can also see, I guess, that it's a bit bumpy. Here's definitely, like right now, here's a bit of a bump, and there's also a bit of a hole in the track, probably because of the nastiness of this bump, to be honest. Okay, so yeah, you probably have to use it anyway, no matter how bumpy it is, just because you can carry more speed onto the straight. This then will be third gear, fourth gear, probably going to be fifth over this crest here. And then again, very, very little left and right of the track where you could find your braking point. You'd probably use this small exit road here maybe as a marker, or you can use this curb on the right here as a braking marker. But then there's a really nice and tricky corner, another tricky one ahead. Let's look at it from above, and you can see it's probably the tightest, where the red-white curb is on the inside and then opens up a tiny, but it definitely stays a corner pretty much until the braking zone. And what you'll do is just pretty much go off throttle very slightly into the brakes, just to reassure yourself you're trying to reduce the speed, shift down. And as soon as the car has turned in up until here, so you pin the throttle down to keep the speed alive, keep the rotation going, and you're probably running a bit wide here, and then you barely make it here into the braking zone. Also, pretty few markers, especially then in the rain, although it will be difficult. I guess the orange bit there on the sidewall can assist you in finding the braking point here. And then we have another really interesting corner, which we know from another track pretty much, and this is going to be a 180, 190 degree. It's not really a hairpin, it's pretty much the same as the Dunlop corner on the Nürburgring at the bottom of the hill. Yet it does have more banking, that's the first thing, which makes it somewhat similar to the Nordschleife carousel, in my opinion. Not as extreme, though. So as we go into the corner, you can see now, oops, I'm a bit fast here. You can see the banking coming, and there's huge amount of forces on the steering wheel if you're on a direct drive here and you crank up the forces a bit. So the banking drags you to the inside of the corner, but don't do too much, because this curb is way too small to give you security, and using it, I wouldn't recommend it. It's all a bit too bumpy. And also here you're somewhat trying the double apex approach, coming to the inside early, running a bit wide to the middle of the corner, coming to the inside once more, and then you get the same issue as out of turn one, where initially you feel a lot of grip, the car's rotating like crazy because you have the banking working with you, and then towards the exit all of a sudden the banking stops, you come over a small crest, the car gets super light on the exit here, there isn't much curb to use, so more often than not you'll find your tires in the grass there. So make sure to put the apex really late to straighten the car early, and then this exit will become nice. Another not so much of a straight ahead, and you want to take a wide swing here to straighten up for the braking zone. The only issue is it's hard to see really, but this is a super bumpy section, and you'll feel it once you drive along here. Just before the braking zone you will have a major bump, upsetting the car, potentially forcing you into oversteer, and you want to have that corrected once you hit the brakes here slightly after this pole on the right, which I'm sure during a race won't be there for long. So you want to find a different braking marker, and let me try this perspective here to give you a few ideas where this could be. So this light pole here could do as a braking marker. It's probably a bit too early, but I mean, in the rain it could become a reference point. This pole will be gone, but there's a specialty in the fence here where it has additional support on the pillars, so this could work as a reference point. And else you have this ambulance here, which hopefully stays in place for the entirety of the race. Then this chicane here, I'll show you later in the hot lap. This curb looks more nasty than it is on the left. It's probably due to the ground collision update that this is not as nasty as it was in the past, which makes me think that we're gonna have to rethink the Imola chicane, for example, too. So you definitely want to jump across that curb entirely, basically, because it seems to work, to open up this right-hander. And this right-hander then really only allows you to use the curb. Don't dip the tire into the sand here because it's way too deep. The car is almost going to fall off the track there, and then it bottoms out, spits you out bad. This curb changes towards the end here. Make sure not to use as much because suddenly it changes, becomes super narrow, and you're in the sand again. All these places are predestined to give you pressure loss on the tires, and you want to avoid that, I guess. Then from here, it's pretty much straight for a while. You can go over this quite harshly. Just also make sure to not lose pressure here going into the sand. So make sure come off the curb quite quickly. No issue whatsoever on the right here, running off track. Over the crests up and down a tiny bit, and then we have a few braking markers here. Should they be gone, we have the Marshall post there. So this is pretty straightforward, I'd say, but the corner itself is becoming super tight once more. And this reminds me a lot of the Monza first chicane, I have to say, even though the right-hander there isn't too much of a 90-degree as it is on Monza. However, you want to make sure to not really one wide here and have it tight. Oops, mouse pad ended there. Not have a tight entry here, but you want to make sure to really go for this line. Stay on the outside here, have a nice entry into the left-hander, because on the exit then is the next specialty here. No curb whatsoever, nothing to save you from tiny mistakes there on the exit. As soon as you dip it into the grass, you'll lose half a second and more. So make sure to focus on the exit of the chicane rather than running fast into the entry there. Because then the next bit is the short straight after is so short that you have a lot of trouble getting the car over to the left side. And I just want to paint this from above here once more, which will be like this. So you're coming from this corner and then to the outside there, and then there's very little time to get the car across. And doing this weight transfer here, this is the really nasty bit coming into this corner, because the track is going downhill. The rear is going to become really light. You'll have a lot of oversteer there if the balance isn't right in the car and if you're doing it too harshly. So make sure to get this weight transition here done as early as possible to not be forced to make it a harsh one here into this right-hander, because then afterwards you have a bit of a longer straight where you'll be able to gain a lot of time. So sacrifice all of this here before just to get the straight afterwards right. Hey, stop it. I'd really like to see the other versions of this track too, like go around this corner and go around this chicane there and whatever we have. Let's see if we get different layouts. So this curb on the inside, well, there isn't much to use, but you definitely want to use it just for how narrow the track is, even though take here, again, very bumpy. And then on the exit, this is probably the worst curb on this track. Initially it's alright, but then here in this section, if you just look at it from the right, it has almost sharp teeth, and you definitely feel this in the force feedback. My whole room was shaking from that curb on the direct drive, and you can see it in the Delta too. It's going to cost you time, which we don't want, of course. Make sure to come off the curb quickly then, because here it's suddenly the additional support ends. You're gonna lose pressure, you're gonna lose more speed, the car might bottom out, and this curb is, yeah, going to be a pain in the ass on most of your laps, I'll tell you that. Okay, up the hill, all flat out here over the crest, and then now orientate towards the outside, really important here, and do take a wide swings to straighten up for the braking zone. And then in the braking zone itself, you're kind of drifting towards the outside here, and now very tricky corner ahead, which we'll, I think, see best from above. You can see there's a first corner kind of here, then it straightens up, and a second corner here, which means your line in this corner will, I think there's different takes, okay? So you can do something like this, then overshoot a bit through the first apex and come in for a second apex here or so. I guess there will be another line that is possible, which could be just a late entry here, staying wide, and then coming only to the inside for a single apex, and from here the lines shouldn't be different too much. You have to experiment what you're comfortable with, because the track again is really narrow, right? This distance here is only, I don't know, you can probably only fit 3 cars or something, which is really narrow for a racetrack. And yeah, just doing any mistake here on the entry, going too fast or clipping the grass or something, will always send you into the woods. So it's probably best to focus on the pink line for now until you're comfortable risking a little more there into this kind of double rate. Additionally, why this is so tricky here is that we're going to go downhill and there isn't really banking to keep the car on the road. So it's going to be very light. The front is not going to have lots of grip. Then all of a sudden you're coming down an additional kind of downhill section here for the second corner. This curb here on the inside, just a tiny bit that you can really use. The other bit is going to spit you out. It's a bit bumpy here. I think you'll feel it better once you go fast. And then you kind of come into this dipper, tiny bit at least, and you get the indication from the, oh no, there's grip. And the car starts rotating and you get the confidence. But then next thing that happens is the track is misleading you completely. You're coming over this crest here and all of a sudden the car becomes really light. The rear is going to step out. You get understeer, all sorts of problems that you want to avoid. So it's also important to kind of take this small crest on the exit there into account when you make your line. Stay tight for a tiny bit longer. Apply the throttle a tiny bit later than you would normally do if the crest wasn't there. Okay, then last straight ahead, going for the last braking zone, again coming down the hill. Now we do have a marker here. I'm not sure how long it will be there in an actual race, so maybe this tree serves as a braking zone or something. I don't see anything on the right there really. Tricky to find one here, apart from where the white line turns a bit more black, which in the rain, well, won't be easy to see. So working this out for yourself, what you can use here as a reference point for yourself. And then coming into this last corner, which again is really tricky. First you fall into it, so it goes downhill, the car gets light, doesn't have much grip. Then it kind of builds the grip as the car as the track levels again. And you want to put a late apex here, which is kind of already reflected by the curb there. But you can also see that the corner radius itself, it's not a perfect shape. In the end, you'll do something like a 90 to 100 degree corner, but there's a little like a little curvature on the entry. Then it gets more, then it becomes less, gets more again, plus going downhill, plus banking, plus coming over a crest at the exit again, makes it all really tricky to find the right point in this corner where you want to be with which amount of speed, but you should see this better in the hot laps later on. So then you come to the inside here, and again, the banking gives you the perception of grip going downhill. Now uphill, the car does grip up, but suddenly you're coming over this crest, the banking stops, the car becomes light, and there's still 30 degrees of corner to go or something. So you're suddenly going to run really wide here. There's this extra curb where you can off-track the car easily, and yeah, just about when you caught the car, you're going to run into this dipper where you can put the splitter into the ground where it's a bit bumpy on the exit, and you want to take care of either enough ride height or making the car stiff enough to really cope with the section. And then you're around a lap of Oldham Park where you see there's very little brakes for the driver. It's basically you're always doing something. The longest straight is probably like 3 to 4 seconds or something. This will be very, very hard for endurance races. Let's move on to Donington. Now we're going to Donington, And I think out of the 3 tracks here, this is the one where we'll have the best racing in terms of passing opportunities, because Snetterton and Oulton Park alike are so tricky to drive and so narrow that I find it really, I can hardly imagine there being loads of fight, and if you get one, it's going to be really difficult to keep both cars on the track. So going over to the game once more, we're on Donington, and right before the last corner, and let's start again at the start. There's a plane flying somewhere. There you go. Hello. And you even have the shadow on the track, which is kind of nice. I don't know how often it comes or what the frequency is. Kind of gimmicky. Almost an Easter egg. Okay, so start finish straight then with a brand I adore. However, this time you have the braking markers on the right side, and which makes it hard to see sometimes or align it, but luckily enough you do have this green patch here from the exit of the pits, and this is also pretty much your braking point where this green parts end or where this last kind of white arrow in there is. Does very well as a braking marker. Just make sure there's no other car coming because you're right driving into its tracks. Then you want to probably brake with the middle of the car here on, well, the white line or something, or even further outside until the game gives you the off-track notification in the end. And then this corner is, yeah, well, it starts difficult, I'd say, because of how the corner develops. And it does start with a easy curvature at the beginning. The radius takes its time to increase, and then let's say 2/3 into the corner it actually becomes the tightest. So you'll again have to focus on a very late apex here and to keep the car on the outside for quite a while to really get a nice run on the next stretch, which is flat out for the entirety of the time. So you're going to stay on the outside for quite a bit longer and then really come towards the inside later on here to make this exit nicely. Okay, just keep that in your head, because the curb on the outside isn't particularly wide. It's going to make it difficult for you to stay on the track if you're not nailing the apex on the inside here. This green extra curb here is nice, but if you're there, you're pretty much on the inside of the corner way too early, and you want to do this a bit later on here. So yeah, here on the exit, not much room for mistakes, so make sure to get that exit right by straightening the car a bit early, which means putting the apex a bit later, staying outside for long throughout the corner. Then all flat out down here, it's nice in the force feedback on the direct drive. You get loads of forces on the wheel here through this section. And then next tricky bit really is how you're approaching this braking zone, right? Because you usually don't have enough time to come to the left side and have a perfectly straight braking zone. So you're somewhat braking diagonal towards the outside curb there. And this does serve as a braking marker at the beginning, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be there forever once cars start fighting and going off track. However, then you're running to the outside here. Just kind of use the sound of the curb it makes to reassure you where the car is positioned, and then straighten it up as soon as this noise kicks in. You definitely want to brake earlier for this corner than it appears. That's just a perception I was developing throughout my practice here. This corner is slower than it looks at the beginning. It's more like a second gear, not really third gear corner. You want to make sure to come to the inside, because if you look at this from here, I think you can see this. There's a bit of a banking to the outside, and it's going uphill, which gives a really weird behavior to the car. The rear is going to become really light again. Or initially you get the understeer, then you get the oversteer, but there's less grip than you would have on a flat track, or even the banking to the other direction. So yeah, less speed than the corner radius suggests for the banking, dragging you to the outside of the corner. You can use alt curb on the inside though, really flat curb, make use of that to your advantage. And then on the exit, it's nice that the curb is wide here, but where you're actually running wide is here. So yeah, I don't know who designed that, to be honest. Then there's a bit of sightseeing going on with the old bridge that's not a bridge anymore, really. Flat out through here, this whole section. Sticking to the inside here, really important, like coming from the outside here, really. Making sure you get a straight braking zone once more. let me just quickly paint this here. So I don't think you should be following this here. I would not do this. I would stay, sorry, I can't see through my wheel here. You want to stay on the outside here and straighten up for this braking zone. Okay, this is what you want to do to get the car nice and ready for the next corner there. Going a bit closer, this one does have the banking initially here to the right, but then the banking stops middle of the corner here, and you're coming over this crest, which again makes the car really light on the exit, and you're gonna run wider than you were expecting initially. Also, this corner, really weird shape, does overall amount to 90 degrees, right? But just how the curvature develops throughout the corner is, or it can be really misleading. So initially you have some curvature, then it stops, then it's more curvature again, and you can already see, I think in this case, this is right, where the curb is becoming darker from the ties going over. This is also when you want to have your apex in this one. This time also where the curb is wider does make more sense. You want to use that, but make sure to come off it really quickly, because I don't know, that was saving money or just trying to prevent the cars from overshooting too much. Next braking zone, really interesting, because this is really a blind corner. You can just barely see this marker here from down here. I guess if you're in the McLaren, it might be harder to see because you're so close to the ground. In other cars, it might be easier. And then there's not really a marker because that one doesn't serve. The curb itself has started. I guess it's where, of course, where it gets darker here, but you want to have a second representation or orientation point. Maybe it's this orange bit on the sidewall there that can help you find your braking point more consistently. And then coming up the hill here, the car is slowing down a lot, but as soon as you come over the crest, of course the car gets light at the front, very easy to lock up or run too harshly into the ABS, and the car kind of stops slowing down as much as before. A little banking going on here. You can use all the curb. This pole, I guess, will be gone sooner than later for where it's positioned. And then this corner is a bit tricky because here it's not really stopping. You can't really go for this exit here because there's a second corner kind of coming up. So there is going to be a compromise that you need to do by going even a little slower than it would first appear, delaying the apex a tiny bit longer, delaying the throttle application a tiny bit longer to really make it as quickly as possible onto that straight and not having to lift somewhere in this section because you run out of track. So just be a bit patient here and then put the power down once the car is really ready. Onto this straight, a little bit down the hill here. The braking marker here is a bit easier. It's pretty much, I thought it was between these two markers. So it's somewhere where the ideal line gets a bit darker, quite hard to see here. So it's, I guess, the middle of these two brake markers, which this case, this one stripe certainly does not say 50 meters. This is more like the 150, then there's nothing, and this is just a warning, there's a corner ahead. And then this chicane here does have the poles, it does have the tire stack, which will all be gone sooner than later. You can use all the curb here, and it's, I guess, important to find where the game exactly gives you the penalties for the off-track. I guess Kunas will enforce the white line for the outside tires there. Then same pretty much for the other side of the chicane. This bump here, the sausage, is nothing to be concerned about. It's super flat, and you can just use all the track here up into the sandbox, really. Nothing to upset the car. Build your speed, keep your speed through the chicane. Not really a passing opportunity because it's a bit faster than you would imagine a chicane to be. Down this short straight, and you already see you want to take a slight swing from the outside here to straighten up the car, and then slightly after the curb starts where the next braking marker here is, that's where you want to apply the brakes. You want to make sure you are straight already, and then you're coming for a very tight hairpin here, which is pretty much 2 corners. And I guess you want to do something like a double apex approach here too, so this will look something like this, and you keep slowing down up until here or so, and then let the car roll, do the last bit of rotation here, straighten up for the exit. Then the last corner is even worse, I have to say. and even harder to judge. So you're coming over this slight, well, uphill section here, and then you're coming over the crest, and suddenly the car becomes super light, and the corner has a very, very stark change of the radius, and it's a super tight hairpin. It's a lot tighter than you imagine it to be, and of course also it seems like the shape of the corner itself is misleading. It starts off wide, then it becomes ever tighter. The corner radius changes a few times throughout the corner, which is really misleading to you as a driver, and you will notice really quickly that you have to go a lot slower through this one than you would initially expect, and you probably need 3, 4, 5 laps to really think, okay, I have to take it even earlier on the brakes to really make this corner. Then onto the straight, no real surprises here. Use that curb, it's super flat, no surprises. And this should be a lap of Donick. Now, I guess this is one of the 3 tracks where we see the most racing action, because the others make it near impossible to really get in a fight. Okay, this should be it for the track guides. Let's move over to the hot laps. Let's start with the hot laps now and start with Snetterton, which very interesting track, very tricky. You've seen it in the track walk already that there are a few places that are really, well, challenging for the driver. So I guess best thing we can do is get right into it. Okay, so through the last corner here, there's this curve with a bank on the inside, and then the corner keeps going and going and going, and eventually we'll be in the last corner. Let's do the first 2 laps. The first lap maybe, who knows, a bit slower, okay, not push too hard here. Search the braking point somewhere here, I guess. And then that's way too slow. Wait for the second apex, and then even then it's hard to make the exit there. Aim for a double apex approach here. Not really visible, but in your head I think it helps, keeping that concept in mind. Then here just a slight tap of the brakes, the downshift, keeping the speed alive, or rather slow down for longer or deeper into the corner. And this one here you probably have to brake later than it looks like, because the corner is very slow. Exit, you can use a curb easily. Now this one's super tricky, downshift, bumpy on the inside, gonna spit you out, be prepared. Barely any time to get the car across to the other side here. Gentle on the throttle and patient, even more important, because the corner just won't end there. Oh, no off track. I'll put the brake by, no, let's keep it like this. I'll put the brake forward next round and you'll see why. Because here the rear is really going to be snappy if you have the rear too loose. So let's go up a few clicks. For this one, use this dipper there to your advantage. Curve seems harsh. Accelerate well into this corner. And then, yeah, adjust the speed here. So there's still some perfection that needs to still be learned. Okay, lap time probably not too relevant. Let's try do everything a bit more aggressive. So braking a bit later, a bit more into the corner, a bit longer, coming for the second apex here. Now I think this looks way more promising in terms of lap time. Brake a little harder, deeper here. You were already hearing the front brakes screaming, they're getting a little hot. Let's try this quicker too. Yeah, the car is fighting for the traction there. Going a bit over some bumpy parts, end of the curve. Braking as late as I can, but you see I'm already running wide, not really benefiting at all from this. And now trying this a little harsher, faster too. Avoiding the curve on the inside a bit definitely gains time. Sticking it even tighter and then having a nicer exit. Aim for a late apex here, and as you pass the tire stack, put the power down, carry some speed onto the straight. Now the brake bias should be less aggressive, so I think we'll have a better shot in this corner now, braking at the last part here. definitely more stability. Still the rear comes around a little, but this can be wanted. Alright, some time here as well. Now accelerate way deeper here. Carry the speed, carry the speed. Make use of the swinging rear to your advantage. And that's already almost a 45. I think this would be a good lap. And I think we can leave it at that and go over to Oulton Park. Or can I do the 45? You know me, I'm a hot lapper. Sorry, Gaggle. I could see the time there. Better exit here or not? Yeah, a bit. And now I was having time in this corner. Tiny bit early on the brakes, hook the inside a bit better, get the cut done with the corner. There was more time. There's a 45 already visible. Lost a bit through this one. And overshooting. Okay. Let's do Oulton Park, which I find is the most interesting of the tracks from a driver perspective, just because it's so super difficult, so many things to consider when driving along, and probably the most rewarding when you really nail a lap. So let's take a look at that. Using some kind of setup, I think we used for Zolder. Slight change to the overall balance of the car. And let's take an easy lap to begin with to see how the elevation and bumps and banking pulls the car into these corners. Take the wide swing here, and then you see here's a lot of bumps happening into this corner. The car gets completely loose. You have to wait quite a bit for the car to regain grip. Then here, a lot of force feedback on the steering wheel. And double apex approach here, certainly very doable. The banking pulls you nicely through the corner. Now watch out for this bump. There you go. And then harsh over this curve on the left, not so much on the right. And on the exit, this one can be safely ignored. I'll turn up the TC to 2, because you'll see exit of the next corner is quite the handful. Short shift, not entirely sure if that's the right way to go, but it's definitely easier to manage to power up the engine this way. This curve on the exit there is brutal to the force feedback. Stick it to the inside early here, or rather outside for the braking zone. Very bumpy elevation changes. Now coming over the crest, car gets loose. Once to understeer, then oversteer. And last corner, want to brake very deep, very long, have a very late apex here to open up the exit. So this was the slow take. Now let's try a tiny bit more aggressive. Almost clipping the curb, more to have on the exit there for sure. Was hoping to be able to work with the oversteer a bit. That was denied, plus off track at the exit. I can certainly try to get more speed through here. Yep. Stick it to the inside, just wait. Now let's try even harsher over the chicane here. Would have to find out if that's an off track or not, or if you can really go that hard over the left side curve there. Let's try that next lap. Stay in first, maybe. That's better. Yeah, the short shift into second a bit late, that doesn't hurt as well. Again, take the wide swing here. And then be patient for the second part of the corner. That's a lot better. Can go a bit later, a bit deeper, maybe stay outside for longer, then come to the inside very late. And that time looks easy. Maybe we can do 32. Oh, that was better usage of the track right there. Touching the brakes a little bit earlier here. The curb spit us out. Damn it, I can see that. 132, and now you got me hungry. That's going to destroy the tire. Let's try... Ah, damn, we have the off track already. I wanted to see how much you can go over this one here. Was definitely better to have first gear through here, manage the throttle, and do the short shift as you do the weight transition. And I have one more lap. Pressures are not entirely on point on the right side. Not enough to the inside there. Let's try one more lap. But you really have to make all of these elevation changes, banking changes, and bumps work for you. Track widens here a bit. Trying to make use of that, but take it. Come on, man! I'm trying too hard. Now, without using the inside curb, it looks better on the exit here by far. I don't use the brakes anymore, just off throttle and into the lower gear. Bit deeper into here as well, making more of a double apex approach, a little more pronounced at least. Work with the bump. Brake well into that chicane, right? You're braking over this left-hander and into the right-hander, so the braking zone is longer than you'd initially think. Now that looks like a decent lap. Let's see if I can finish it. Even though off track first corner, I'll just ignore that. Pretend it didn't happen. Stick it to the inside, power down. That looks decent on the exit. Just last corner to go. Brake a bit deeper. There's the 132. Even if not valid, I'm pretty sure this is well possible. But you can see there's very little brakes on this track. You're always working on the wheels somewhat, always something that can catch you off guard. That's what I mean, the most rewarding if you nail the lap. So I think this will be a challenge to you. Have fun with that. And on to Donington. Over to Donington now, which I think is likely going to be the track where we'll have the most racing going on eventually, just because it's the only track that really allows for a side-by-side action. So, I don't know, let's just get into it.
Green line, go, go, go.
So on the backstretch here, and you'll immediately see into the last corner that I will overshoot very likely, because it's just so tight and it's really easy to misjudge. But the nice thing in Donington is the surface is flattened, you don't have as many bumps as on the other tracks, and it's more pleasing to drive, even though then not as spectacular. Okay, let's get closer towards the limit here within a couple laps. Loads of force feedback coming there. Braking a bit earlier. Well, third gear is fine, but you see the corner tightens once more. Take the wide swing, get the braking zone straight. I gotta brake more than you'd initially think. Okay, that was a bit too cautious. Still running wide on the exit though. And okay, 1 or 2 poles is gone. Let's see how many laps it can survive. Very important to get nice traction here. And now, as I'm coming faster, gotta brake probably earlier than I think. I guess by now I got it. Okay, I think we're looking at 127, 126 is in the end. Who knows, it's quite warm right now. Yep, that was the absolute opposite of what I was aiming for. So I went for an early apex and then I ran really wide. So don't follow my example and go for a wide exit instead. A late apex, not wide. Also, patience pays off here. All these corners want late apexes of you. Yep, and earlier braking. A bit of patience on the throttle there, and then already more speed onto the straight. More attack in the chicane. Okay, can do that even faster, I guess. Okay, a bit early on the brakes. Can definitely do that a tiny bit later. Okay, let me not fail. Maybe I can use even more in the entry here. Still not the way I want to drive it. Hard to find the right line. I think I remember Donington from Toka Touring Cars 1 and 2. So it's quite a while back. Must be 20 years or more. Still not early enough on the brakes. Keep adjusting, gets better. Let's see if we can carry more speed here even. Okay, it's hard to hit the second inside pole because it's hidden behind the tire stack. That was a bit deep. Almost stalled the engine. Let's do one more. 60 kilometers, the slowest speed in the corner. Really slow. Better, but still not perfect. Better, still not perfect. And now let's brake a little earlier even than before. Now this looks much better, despite the oversteer. Okay, full attack chicane. I guess 126 is possible here. Just about the off track, not happy. So the braking point there is somewhat in between the braking marker and where the tarmac gets more black. Okay, now I want the 126. So I'm right caught into hot lapping. Too early on the brakes. Okay, you can just use the grass if you need to. The pole really helps orienting into this corner, but I doubt it will be there for long. There's the plane again above us. Ooh, looking better now. And too eager. Come on. That looks decent. I'll stick to this 126.8 in, what do we have here? 29, 34 degrees. So yeah, we'll probably see 125s within a day or two after release. This shall be it in terms of the hot laps. I hope you get a good impression of the game, and I'm now going to do Kunos a favor and buy it. See you soon.